Thank you very much, Ed, and hello everyone in Australia and New Zealand and wherever in the world you might be. There is a big sign on the screen, I hope, which says bring a piece of paper and a pen. So the hint is, could you please bring a piece of paper and a pen, because you will need it. But first of all, I'm wondering, what if I taught you that being a huge part of an Olympic athlete actually doesn't involve leaving the house, which might be quite appropriate for the current times. And it doesn't involve leaving the house because a lot of things that are going on for an Olympic athlete are things that are in your head, that are in your mind. It's the attitudes in life that you develop and the habits that you create for yourself. So I'm a recovered Olympian. And that's actually a lie. Because if you have ever played sports, if you have ever done sports on any level, whether it's at the school level or just for fun, then you know that you'll never actually recover. Because this is stuff that stays with you for life. And that's really, really cool. I've done a lot of sports in my life. I represented Austria in handball in 1992, in the 1992 Olympics. And I've had a professional career in Austria and in Denmark. And what I'm going to share with you today are all the things that I have learned during the course of an Olympic career so that you don't have to do all the work and can learn from your homes. Today, what I'm doing is a totally different career. I am an agile coach. For all my CrossFit friends who happen to be around, that basically means I play with Post-it notes. And I also help organizations to create and design high performance teams. And I believe I'm qualified to do that because I have been part of world-class teams. And while my current office looks a bit like this is my old office. Handball, which lots of you probably don't know what it is, but I'll come to that in a second. Handball is one of the biggest sports in Europe. I think it's the biggest or the second biggest sports in Europe right after football. Unfortunately, we don't have rugby, and I think that would be a great thing for Europeans to get better at. But it's a sport that has been Olympic since the 1970s, and it attracts several thousand participants each game. Have any of you tried playing handball? And I know that all the Europeans are probably going, yep, I know what it is. Everyone else, I'd like to ask you if you know what it is. And I also know that most of you are now thinking about the schoolyard and a tiny ball that you play with your hands like that. To those people, I'd like to say, thank you for playing, but you're wrong. So now I'm going to play a video, which is about a minute, and to show you what handball really is, at least the handball I am talking about. Okay, I know that at least 70% of you would wish they could play handball right now, because it's actually really, really fun. And the thing is that given the mentality in Australia and New Zealand, I think people could be really, really good here. So I really hope it's going to take off at some point. But if you want to be good at something, then it is a really good idea to start early. This is me at the tender age of 4 doing sprint resistance training. I was also really aware of the importance of stretching and being tall. This is my dad trying to help me be really, really tall. And all my childhood and my youth were me being a sports geek. I loved nothing more than doing sports. I did all sorts of other sports when I was a kid. And when I was about 12 or 13, I started playing handball. I went to a special school for athletes when I turned about 14. And my idea of a great holiday was to travel Europe and to just play handball all the time. It didn't make me the most social person ever, because basically when I stopped playing handball, I had no idea what normal people actually talked about. But what it was useful for was my second career in software development, because it turned out being a geek and being not a super social person actually made me fit in quite well. And for all of you who are real geeks and who don't like sports jocks, I can actually tell you we're not that different. But what all of this has made me was it has given me the joy of achievement. It has given me the pleasure of winning. And I've kept this all my life. And I know that very often we talk about just being part of something is great, participating is great, and it is. But winning just really, really rocks. And I think we should also acknowledge that. And this is something I have preserved until now. The thing I haven't preserved is this amazing jersey, pink in size XXL. My only excuse was it was the 80s. But like in real life, in a real job, whether it's sports or anything else, if you want to be really good at something, you've got to be professional, because you need to have the focus and you need to spend the time to actually hone your craft and be really, really good at what you are. And it doesn't matter whether that's sports or anything else. So this is me turning professional age 18. And this is also what they do to you when you have to do those photos. You're like totally not allowed to smile. This is my first real grown-up team and my first professional team. Austrian champion, I don't know how many times, but 3 times European Champions League winner. And for anyone who's German or Austrian, you might remember Hyper Niederösterreich from the times they were still good. To give you an idea what professional sports is like, fundamentally, it's an exercise in dedication and pain management. Because your day looks like that you train twice a day. And you actually train quite hard. Don't know if any of you have ever tried this, but you basically do uphill sprints until you vomit. And then you do 5 more. And it's not so different from business life, where a lot of it is pain and is uncertainty and is reacting to things that are going on. If you're working in a startup, you don't really know if you're going to have a job a month from now. Actually, most of us probably don't know that right now. Even if you're in a big corporation, there is uncertainty at the moment, but there's also the hardship and the problems of working or walking through this mutt of bureaucracy and trying to get stuff done. So that pain is not just something that is unique to sports. That's also something that can be a part of whatever you do. But where this all got me were the Olympic Games in Barcelona. And we had a saying, which was no pain, no Spain. This is me, and we finished 5th, which was a bit of a disaster because we were the big favourites. But I'm still glad that we didn't finish 4th, because I think that must be pretty much the worst that could happen to anyone at the Olympics, finishing fourth. And in the Olympic Village, I remember there was this big tattoo shop, and every single person went there and got a tattoo. I was too young to realize that this was a good idea. And I think I'm the only person ever to have regrets about not getting a tattoo when they were young. But what I got instead is a number of life lessons that I only now can put into perspective, that only now, 30 years later, I can look back on and see how things relate. And I can draw the parallels between my professional life now and my professional life at the time. And I'm not talking about analogies, but I'm talking about real things that I have learned that I can apply directly. And I'm going to share those with you, hoping that you can use them too. And let me just start with my very first tip, which is pick your team wisely. Because the question is actually, how do you decide which team to join? Which team do you want to be a part of? And I've got my number one guideline is to be the worst player on the best team that will still accept you. Why? Well, that's how you learn. If everyone is lots and lots better than you, you're surrounded by people who are really good and who you can learn from. You get the best coaches, you get the best conditions for learning, and you can learn from others. And it helps you to normalize high performance. Because if you're an Olympian, you don't wake up every single day going, oh my God, I'm an Olympian. It's completely normal because all your friends are going to the Olympics too. All your friends are high performing athletes too. So you completely normalize this high performance, which is really helpful in getting better at what we do. The thing is, it is really not fun. And the reason it's not fun is because you feel inadequate. And the reason you feel inadequate is because you are. Remember, you're the worst player on the best team that will still accept you. Not a great, fun place to be in. I remember being 16 and making the Austrian national team for grown-ups. And it was the toughest time of my life because I was playing with those people who were really, really old. They were like 25. So I had to play with those old people and I didn't even know whether I should use the formal or informal you. We had nothing in common. And at the same time, I was training really, really hard, just trying to keep up. Fun? Definitely not. But super, super satisfying. And even though I cried myself to bed many times, I knew where I wanted to be and I knew that sticking with it would just get me to where I wanted to be. And it's also something that I think we can use in real life. If you are working with a team, and I would say that almost everyone is working as a team, it's quite rare to have a job where you can succeed or want to succeed on your own. Choose your team really, really wisely. If you're lucky, you get to choose your team. You get to decide within your organization who you want to work with. If you don't get to choose, well, maybe create the conditions so you get into a better skilled team. Negotiate with a manager, run a side project, teach something, and see if this team or your manager will accept that you go there. And if you really, really, really want to rock it, then I recommend doing a self-selection. Self-selection is a method, it's a facilitated way of helping people and entire organizations decide which team everyone should be in. And it's based on the belief that people work their best when they get to choose who they want to work with and what they want to work on. So I've written this handy little guide that people can read to do self-selections at their organizations. But even if you can't convince your organization to let everyone pick their own teams, I think we all got a chance just learn from people who are better than us. I still apply this today, even though I'm not part of an organisational team where I could select my team. I make sure I learn from other people who are better than me. For example, this is me learning from 2 amazing Australians how to do a proper Tim Tam slam. But on a more serious note, make sure to go to conferences, make sure that you create a community around you where you can learn from other people. And I think we're lucky in Australia and New Zealand, because the secret is it's kind of small countries, and it's not that hard being well known and being top 5 in your country. And what that gives you is all of a sudden access to the big 5 or to the 5 best people in other countries. I remember being an agile coach about 13 years ago, and I probably wasn't that good. Okay, let's face it, I was a beginner, I was probably shit. But I managed to make it into the top 5 in New Zealand, and that gave me access to top 5 in other countries, in Sweden and the US. And that's when I started really, really learning. And again, I was by far the worst person. Not fun, really, really hard, but I learned a lot. So now I want to ask you to reflect about your situation and what you're doing. Are you the worst player on the team that you're on? And that can be your team or your organization. Which teams or team do you actually want to be part of? And what do you think is going to get you closer? I'm going to put those questions on the screen. I'm going to start a timer, and I'll give you 2 minutes to reflect on that.
Should start some thinking music.
Should have done that.
So if anyone has questions, don't forget there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the toolbar there, and that collects up questions that Sandy can answer towards the end, I guess. I'm participating in the chat too, so go on there and just be aware to change the option to send it to all the attendees if you otherwise I think it just sends it to the panelists, which is me, Lisa and Sandy.
I am happy to answer questions afterwards. Right now I have too many screens and too many windows to control of what's going on.
Exactly. All right.
By the way, that was what the pen and paper were for. So write down what you come up with. Okay, is everyone back again? Lots of nods. Okay, I'm just pretending I can see you. So back to what we're talking about. Now that you know which teams you do want to be part of, and have hopefully reflected about which teams, or if you are in the right team, there's also a really important part, which is knowing when to go. And I feel very often in our work lives, we feel that we can't leave. We can't leave a job. We believe that we need to stay there, and we feel that we're letting people down if we leave. Thing is, no athlete ever would think about that. It's totally okay in sports to move on to a better team. If a better team will accept you, you go. The same should happen at work. If you time and again find yourself being the smartest person in the room, time to go, because that means you've stopped learning. And don't be a dick about it, because in sports, we don't just go, hey, we're in the middle of a season, I'm off. There are transfer windows. There are times where this is possible, and you make sure there's a succession plan in place. But there's nothing wrong leaving a team because you find that you can't learn enough anymore. It's also majorly important to play well with others. And I'm not telling you anything new when I tell you that greatness is never, ever achieved alone. If you do team sports, if you have done a team sports, you will know you can't succeed on your own. And it's also not that important that you constantly work on your weaknesses. What you're trying to do is find a combination of people whose strengths make you a winning team. And I think that's an area where we could learn a lot in our work lives, where we could drop those performance reviews and focusing on people's weaknesses and treating them as opportunities, because they're not. Let's focus on the strengths and creating the best team we possibly can. And when we do that, well, it is actually hard enough to get a team going where everyone is working to the strength, because collaboration is actually really, really hard. And it gets harder and harder the closer you get to being world-class. So why? If you are on a world-class sports team, you are drawing from a really, really big talent pool. People are really chosen by skill and also talent. And what that gives you is a group of people who are incredibly diverse, people who have different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, different demographics, age, very different levels of intelligence and values. I found myself playing on a team where I'm gay. Some people were deeply homophobic. I wouldn't usually waste a minute of my time on them, but they might be the best left wing in the world. So I do want to play with them. And I think that is something that we often miss in our professional lives. We don't need to be friends. We want to have the best people and then find a way to make this work, even though we don't necessarily like each other. In our workplaces, I think we've got a problem. Well, my first problem was that I couldn't find a good picture of people, and the general rule is cats. If you can't find pictures of people, always use cats. In our workplaces, well, our cities are really, really diverse. Auckland has 41% of people who are not born in Auckland. Sydney, 45%. And if you look at our businesses, especially our tech businesses, that's not reflected. So I think we are missing out on a lot of people who could be really, really good, because we are hiring way too much for culture fit and for people who are like us. And that's something I really want to challenge, because people often say, especially in the startup world, that you need to be friends to succeed. I don't think so. We need to respect each other. We need to trust each other. We need to feel safe, but we don't need to be friends. And I'm not saying that having a friend at work isn't great. It's cool, but it's not necessary. It's not a prerequisite for success. I don't need to be a friend, but I need to be able to trust you. But in order to make this succeed, it is really important that we have a reason. We have a really strong and compelling reason why we want to work together and work through our differences and respect each other, even though we're really, really diverse. In sports, it's relatively easy because you have dreams. There's a glue of cohesion, which is a dream, such as going to the Olympics. And for our work lives, I think that's why purposes of organizations and purposes of teams will become more and more important. And apart from having this glue of cohesion, those dreams and those goals, we also need to make sure that we have rules in place for how we interact if we don't necessarily like each other. And there's a book that I really like, which is called The No Asshole Rule. I didn't make up the title. It's really called that. It's by a guy named Bob Sutton. And he has looked into the cost of having one toxic person, one asshole on a team. And it's giga enormous. In sports, that's the player who doesn't pass, who just going for their own win, who just want to score that goal themselves. In work life, that's the manager holding back information. That's the people playing power games. That's the business analyst who refuses to touch a line of code because it's too complicated. And that's the developer who doesn't test. And the thing is, this is behavior that needs to be changed. And we either need to change that behavior or get rid of that person. So playing well with others is about working with people who are not like me. And I want you to reflect again for a minute. Are you working with people who are not like you? Do you share the same dreams? What are they? And can I play with people that you don't like? I'll give you a minute to reflect on that. Cool. Everybody back. I want to emphasize something, and I alluded to it a bit earlier, that not passing, going for your own goal, refusing to help the team because you're highly paid whatever, and something else is beneath you and not your job. That is nothing that is part of someone's personality. This is behavior. And truth to be told, I have been all those people. I've displayed all of these behaviors. And I'm pretty sure that so have you, some of them. Sometimes all of us are being a little bit of a dick. So when that happens, we don't just discount the entire person. We make sure that we can talk about this and change that behavior. And being good at feedback in the sports world, we're talking about two types of feedback. One is feedback on the field, and the other one is feedback off the field. On the field, this is stuff that needs to be told and discussed right away, right here, right now. This is on the field. It can't be after the game because it's too late. It can't wait until halftime. Too late. If I need you to pass the ball in front of me and not half a meter behind me, I need to be able to shout at you and give you that feedback right away. And it doesn't matter who it comes from. This can be a junior person, it can be a senior person, anyone. But this is crucial feedback that needs to be delivered and heard right away. The other type of feedback is feedback off the field. This is for the bigger stuff. This is for the bigger behavioral changes. And that is for what I call discussing the undiscussables. I remember being about 19 and I thought it was a good idea to go out quite a lot. And I went out and I got pissed and I had a great time, and the morning after I showed up to practice and I was doing fine. Until one of the older players took me aside and said, "Sandy, You think you're doing fine. You think nobody notices. And you think this is only up to you and your problem. But let me tell you, it's not. If you do this, all of us are impacted. You're damaging all of us. And I still believe this is, and I changed my behavior based on that. And I've seen that in work teams and software development teams, when people got to a stage that they trusted and respected each other enough to have those conversations, to discuss the undiscussables. There's a framework for feedback that I really like, and it's called radical candor. I'm sure many of you have seen Kim Scott talk about this, and might even have read the book. It comes from a woman named Kim Scott, and it's not so much about how you deliver feedback, because the whole idea of shit sandwiches and how you say it, I think is not so much the point. I think the most important part is where feedback, which emotional position feedback actually comes from. And Kim is a consultant, so of course she's made a grid, which I actually quite like. And that grid has two axes. One is if there's something that needs, where you need to give feedback or receive feedback, do you challenge directly or not? And the other part is, do you really care about that person or not so much? And the area you want to be in is the one that's called radical candor, where you challenge someone directly, you have this direct conversation, and you also really care about that person. That's like the example I just gave. When you go out you don't get enough sleep, it has an impact on all of us and you're hurting the team. There's obnoxious aggression. I've really seen that, like, congrats getting a podcast out. I hate it. There's no value in this. This is just a challenge. It's just being obnoxious and aggressive. No point. There's manipulative insincerity, is when you don't really care about that person and you don't want to challenge them. I've done that, convincing someone they shouldn't be part of my little team. It's like convincing them you'd be way better off somewhere else. And it's something that makes happen what I want to have happen. So it's not necessarily super bad, but it's not feedback. It doesn't help that person change anything or improve anything. And then there's the ruinous empathy. And I think we actually have a cultural problem there in the Southern Hemisphere. And don't get me wrong, I'm Austrian. We are firmly in obnoxious aggression. But what happened to me recently was that I asked someone to give feedback, like a professional person, give feedback on my public speaking. And she taught me a number of things, and that was all great. And I also got to know that I really needed to change my accent, because I'd never succeed with that accent. By the way, if you don't have any idea what I'm saying, then I'll put that in the chat. But, and that's really valuable feedback. The problem with that feedback was she didn't tell me. She told my business partner, because she didn't want to hurt my feelings. And while it's really nice that she didn't want to hurt my feelings, thank you. Problem was, if I don't know about this, I enthusiastically go and work on my problem number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, ignoring the most important part. So it's actually something that is really, really unfair. And I like this feedback because when I receive feedback, this is one of the criteria I use. Where does this feedback come from? And if it doesn't come from radical candor, I probably ignore it. Which brings me to my next thing, which is consider the source. People say, listen to everyone, accept any feedback that you can get, be grateful for any feedback. I think that's rubbish. And I've learned that from this guy, Vinko Kandya, who died a couple of years ago. He was the best coach I've ever had. And from him, I learned not to listen to everyone, to just really consider my source. Because if you're a professional athlete, believe me, every man and his dog has an opinion about how you should play. There's a sponsor telling you to go more to the left side. There is the entire audience telling you, oh, you should shoot more in the upper right corner. You go, yeah, actually, this is noise because you're not qualified to give me feedback. I want the feedback from the people I actually either pay or respect enough to receive feedback from. And that in sports would be your coach. At work, pick someone who you really, really respect. Ask them for feedback and be grateful for it. When you have chosen someone, make sure to actually be coachable. Make sure you do listen to them and make sure that you try what they tell you to do. Sometimes, and by all means, when a coach tells you to do something, ask why, and they should be able to tell you why. But if in doubt, or if you're not really convinced, go with it, because they know, do what they tell you to do and evaluate later if that has worked. So I think pick a few sources for feedback and really, really listen to them. Everyone else, treat them as noise. And let's do a little bit of reflection. I'll give you the questions here, and I'm just setting the timer to 1 minute. Okay. And I've got 2 more tips for you. And the one is to never, ever stop learning. And let's face it, I actually hate learning because learning is really not comfortable. And if you remember that you just put yourself on the best team that will still accept you, where you really are not a good player, this is really not comfortable. And once you're there and you're pushing yourself, I think it's really important not to waste any energy and focus by trying to put up the facade and looking good. In sports, we don't do that because we can't, because we're so desperately trying to hang in there. We are so close to pushing our boundaries that there's no focus and energy left to even worry about that. But I do think in work life, we often do. We're trying to hide our shortcomings. We're trying to look good. And the problem with that is that is energy that goes away from our ability to learn. So I think learning just isn't pretty. Have the courage to be ugly and don't hide your shortcomings. That will really, really amplify and speed up learning. And if you do that, there's something really interesting that happens over the years, because at some point, as an athlete or whatever you do, you're going to outgrow your idols. You'll be at a level where you can't look at anyone else anymore. Where those posters of those amazing players that you always looked at need to come down your wall, because you're on the same level. And you also know that you can't win if you just keep doing the same thing. You can't win if you just do what others have done before you. It's a bit like when people say, oh, as a consultant, you're just 2 pages ahead in the book. I'm going, no, I'm not, because I want to be in a place where there is no book. And that's when it gets really, really interesting. And that's when we need to figure out our own ways. And I think in the Agile community, we're actually quite good at this. We're actually really, really good at following our own advice, which is fail early, fail often. But I've got a little bit of a beef with that because I want to add something. Fail early, fail often, but give a shit. Because very often in our community, I think what we do is we just go, try this, didn't work, move on. I don't think that's the point. For me, learning has always had this amazing emotional connection. It is trying something, and you try something because you believe it's going to succeed. You're trying something because you want it to succeed. And if it fails, it's okay to be gutted. It's okay to feel bad. It's okay wanting to dig a hole on the handball court and trying to leave without being seen. The important thing is to walk into that pain, deal with it, learn from it, and then move on. And I think when we have this emotional connection, the learning actually stays a lot longer with you. As an athlete, we use failure. We use failure to drive us to better performance. This is a picture of me after playing a final in the Danish league. We lost. We lost, and I played a pretty big part in losing this. And I didn't keep any of my medals visibly around. What I did, I had this newspaper clip in my wallet. And it's something I looked at, and I used it as motivation. I used the pain to drive me to practice harder and push myself even more. And I think this is something that we should do in our work lives too. It's okay to fail. It's okay to feel bad about it. And it's okay and good to use that as a driver of fuel to get us to succeed next time. That being said, it is really important to succeed at least some of the time. Because if we don't, we're not allowed to keep playing. So it's about managing risk. And I want to summarize that as rock the boat, but don't sink the ship. So push yourself, learn something new, but don't go for catastrophic failure. Very much like you try new things when you're playing normal games, when you're playing friendlies, even some tournaments that you decide to sacrifice to try new things. You don't try new things at the Olympics. So it's about assessing the risk and making sure that you can rock the boat as much as you can without sinking the ship. So now I want to ask you again, are you wasting time? When's the last time you failed? And which of your failures does fuel you? Give you a minute to think about that. Ed, could I ask you a favor to close the poll because it's in the middle of my screen? Thank you. Cool. And that gets me to my very last tip, which is, I think it is really, really important to be deliberate about your career. Like an athlete, making sure that you pick the right teams, making sure that you learn the right things and you balance your time between learning and performing. And I think that goes for our professional lives too. I've been really deliberate about my professional career too. And the guideline for me was, I know that I'm doing the right thing and I'm in the right place when I feel both fear and excitement at the same time. And I need both. Just one without the other isn't the right thing. I need to be excited about what I do and what I want to achieve and what I want to learn. But I also need to be a little ting of fear. Because if I know I can do it, what's the point? I'm not growing, I'm not developing, I'm not learning. So there should be a little bit of fear and excitement at the same time. So I keep stretching myself. But in order to do that, I think it is really important to have a safety net. And I really thought about whether I should leave this slide in times like these or not. I have always, and I've decided to leave it because I think the advice is valuable, regardless of the insecurities and uncertainties of the current time. Since my very, very first job, I've had some money in the bank to the equivalent of two months worth of salary. So that I never, ever had to stay in a job where I had stopped learning. So I had the freedom to actually look at, am I learning? Am I the worst player? Can I develop? And if not, I could move on. And if you haven't done that yet, that's okay. It's never too late to start. And for everyone who might be out of a job at the moment, or is losing clients left and right and center, like I am, it's also an opportunity to look at who you actually want to work with and what it is you actually want to do. And I think if you do that, then you get the really, really good gigs. You get to be in the teams that you want to be on, and you get access to the best people and the best team, and you get fun things to do. For me, this has worked because sports has made me the person I am today. And I'm very, very glad about the choice of my first career. At the very least, it has prevented me from becoming an Austrian fashion model in lederhosen. So thank you very much for listening. I have summarized the questions I asked you in a canvas, which you can download for free. And I've also added my slides for download.